Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Come on in, grab a seat. And if you are suffering like many of us are from anxiety, don't worry, the countdown music is over. I want to welcome everybody to this session. It's going to be a doozy. In this session, we are exploring how to maximize resource value while balancing economic and social impacts. We're going to hear from pioneering entrepreneurs who are revolutionizing circular business models and material governance here in Europe. Our panel will be delving into the complexities of critical raw materials, from geostrategic issues to societal choices, and we'll be discussing sustainable solutions that enhance competitiveness across industrial value chains. And again, if you're just coming in, come on in, grab a seat, and next time shoot to be early to the panel like we asked you yesterday. Well, get ready, those of you here and those of you arriving, to challenge ideas and discover which business models best promote circularity. But before we start the panel, I'd like to begin with a poll. And it's a very simple poll question. You do it on the app, and if you haven't downloaded the app, I don't know what you're doing wrong with your life. But get on the app and let us know where you're from. I mentioned this morning that we had folks from 100 different countries in the building, and I'd like to know how many of them are represented here. So if you could pull out the app and answer the very simple question, where are you from? And if it's a difficult question, we'll see what the answers are coming in now. So only one person has answered from the country of Aero. A lot of Belgium so far, though I think that's just because it's the first couple that in. Belgium and Finland, there we go. The two great nations of Belgium and Finland in the house. And I have a feeling they're just the only ones that can operate the thing. Canary Islands, well done. Malta, Belgium's still bigger than everybody else. And Netherlands joins the fray right next to its best friend, Germany. They love each other. Don't let them fool you. Dominican Republic really taking up so much space, and then little Italy tucked in there. Netherlands now overwhelming Belgium and Finland. As a Netherlands resident, I'm really proud of these numbers coming in. Taiwan, Malta, and Germany looks like one long German word for a moment there. Now they don't. Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so, boy, Belgium shoulders out Netherlands. I think that's a bigger font right now, right? Now we sort of see the big four. We got a big four right now. Now it's a kind of a big-ish four. It's a big-ish four, really Belgium. Now we're back to it's kind of a big 3.5 now. And I'm honestly not certain how long, I was gonna say how long my narrating this will remain interesting, but I think we're well past the end of that. So I'm just going to say welcome to everybody, no matter where you're from, welcome. And if you haven't answered yet, you're really not good at this. But congrats, we've got Bangladesh joining the fray. I'm glad we waited for Bangladesh. And there were two UKs, one with a lowercase k and one with an uppercase K. Get your act together, UK, and then you'll have bigger letters. I've got another question, and the other question is, what do you expect from this session? I think there'll be less matching on that one, less matching. But what do you expect from this session? I'm going to keep that poll going while the next speaker is talking. So answer quickly and then pay attention to the speaker, because it'll be a fantastic and brief talk. You don't want to be wasting the whole time, trying to say what you expect out of the session. So get that answer in quickly. We'll look at the poll results after this first speaker. But I do want to introduce our first speaker and start things off right. He is an EESC member, a trade unionist, and heavily involved in sustainability. Please welcome to the stage Florian Marin. Florian. Group 2.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for your interest in circularity. My name is Marin Florian, as the previous speaker mentioned, and I'm coming from the European Economic and Social Committee. Well, I'm actually proud to be here. I'm proud because in 2015, my committee, European Economic and Social Committee, proposed to have a platform, a hub, a one-stop shop between stakeholders, main stakeholders, and public authorities. It was in 2015, in one of our opinion, one of my colleagues, Kilian, was the rapporteur, and today we have European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. From my perspective, and from the committee's perspective, this is a result in which civil society, also with public institutions, can cooperate, can create synergies in order to boost circularity in the EU, but also in the world. But What is the role of the civil society in circular raw material, in promoting circularity? Well, I see at least 4 directions. First of all, in the decision-making process, they are part of the consultation process, and they are being involved. Civil society is really involved in amending regulations and debating proposal of directives and regulations, but also things like that. The second, from my perspective, it's education, because the civil society is part of the decision-making process, and it is involved at the grassroots level. Yesterday, it was mentioned that, local authorities are crucial for boosting circularity at the local level. Green Deal will be implemented taking into account the involvement of the local authorities. Without member states, without civil society, without a partnership between all those, the circular economy will be much difficult to implement. So we are part of, and we have a responsibility in order to educate consumers, but also our members. I'm coming from the trade unionist movement, and I have a responsibility for my members. Then the third one, well, civil society could be a watchdog. Could be a watchdog for preventing greenwashing, because it could be a situation like this, but also in tackling fake news. We are seeing that in some member states, in some part of Europe, some products which are circular products, which are not harming the environment, well, are being used in different propaganda issues. Electric vehicle, for example. I'm coming from Romania, more exactly, and I'm seeing this quite often. Then the last one could be sharing best practices, and the platform is doing this very well in order to share best practices and approaches in order to boost circularity. It's obvious that we need innovation and we need more knowledge in promoting better and implementing circular economy. But the problem is also access to innovation, because the innovation should be well spread among the member states, among the states which don't have perhaps the possibility to access that technology. Access to waste is also a problem in some part of Europe, but not only in Europe, because waste is becoming more and more perceived as being a resource, which is a resource, and access to waste is getting more and more difficult. But what I'm seeing is that for all this, we need dialogue and we need cooperation. What I'm seeing is that the market is not enough, because market cannot alone boost circular economy. We need regulation, and we need other kind of dialogue from my perspective. I think that we need social dialogue, because we are discussing about business models. We need social dialogue, and we need solidarity. Europe has been built through solidarity. Everything which is lasting in this world, all our achievement have been built through solidarity. So we need, it is imperative, it is crucial to rebuild and also to protect the European solidarity in order, of course, to boost circularity. I saw yesterday a lot of referrals to access to critical raw materials, competences, and things like that. Well, without skills, without the proper involvement of the workers, and without the right competences, will be extremely difficult to implement circular economy and to have critical raw materials which are circular. We need this kind of approach in order to share responsibility among workers and businesses in order to boost circularity. But it's not an easy task. We need to be sure that we are doing the right thing. Also the consumers, if they want to be involved, and they will be involved in this process, they have to understand that their sacrifice, their purchasing, is really contributing to the circular economy. So we have to also build trust in order to boost circular economy and to discuss about the right business models in the circular economy of the future. So European Economic and Social Committee is working closely with all the legislative proposal. We are quite involved in how we will deal in the future with circular economy and with the critical raw material. And we are open, of course, to debate and to make partnerships for boosting this. Thank you so much. I hope that we will have some concrete answers, some very technical answers from our panelists, and I wish you a fruitful debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Florian. Before I bring up the next speaker, let's take a look at the word cloud and see what folks are hoping to get out of the session. And as you can see, it's very difficult to read. But you all have God. So here's my favorite is right here is sustainable and equitable goals and sustainable equitable supply chains. I mean, it's tough when the word cloud doesn't let you have any spaces, right? Like it just makes it difficult for you. A lot of folks want to see innovation. A lot of folks want to see solutions and inspiration and insights, as well as if you glued the practical insights together with the insights, I think insights might just win out. But then we've got the many worded answers. It's difficult. A lot of complex and some common desires for this session. We're going to see if we can satisfy them as we move on. Because I'm going to bring out the Chief Sustainability Officer from Induffer. Please welcome Carl Franken. Carl.
Thank you, Pep, for the introduction, and thank you for having me to give this introduction here. So the title is circularity the cure for criticality? It's a question, I've put it as a statement. And it's always good to start a bit again from the definitions. What are we talking about and what does this all really mean? I think we need to realize that criticality goes together with the technologies of the future, the things we need, and it has been said already before, it's very much linked to the energy transition, but we need to realize that there's also other things that we need. The whole digital transition will also rely on this vast amount of materials. So here you see a graph from one of the basic studies from the European JRC, the Joint Research Center, which laid the basis for the European definition of the critical raw materials list. So it looks at a variety of materials that we need for the sustainability transition, so not only the energy transition, and it looks where we need which material. And you see that there's a lot of dots in that graph, so we need a lot of material for all these very complex things to work and to be organized, or to be developed. The second thing then is, if we need all these materials, where do they come from? And this is the view for Europe. This is a European perspective. If we need all these materials, where can we source them? And it's very apparent from here that we rely a lot on the rest of the world, on Russia, on China, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Africa. So the materials need to come from other places in the world. Europe does not have its own materials available. And that brings us to this criticality definition. So it is a combination of economic importance and supply risk. And I think that's important also to realize. It has nothing to do basically with environmental impact or with the amount of material that is available in the soil. So it is an economic and strategic principle, this criticality. And that also means that it has a very regional aspect. If Europe defines a list of critical raw materials, it's probably different from the material list from the United States or for a country in the South. So I think that's important to realize this. If we talk about these critical raw materials, it's a regional list, it's an economic and strategic perspective, and also it's not only rare earth metals. Often we think, we're talking about these critical materials, that's the neodymium that we're talking about. No, the list is much broader. There's other things on that, like phosphate rock, like graphite. And that means that if we develop a strategy, it's not a rare earth element metal strategy that needs to be developed. We need to develop strategies that go through a lot of material value chains and product value chains. And so in Europe, we have developed the Critical Raw Materials Act, and there are specific strategies now and specific targets for extraction, for processing, for recycling, and for the diversification of supply. And so you see that recycling is part of the solution there, so that's where the circularity topic comes in. But of course, circularity is much broader than recycling alone. I think it's important to consider, and that's also the topic of this discussion, it's about business models for circularity and for critical raw materials. So we need to think beyond the closing of material flows, beyond the recycling. Recycling will surely not solve the issue of criticality. Also, I think circularity alone will not solve it, but it's important if we discuss circularity that we also think about different business models. It's about slowing material flows, making sure that the objects we make, the products we make, have a much longer lifetime, that they stay in the stock of the society, and that the functionality is maintained. And it's about narrowing flows, making sure that we can deliver the same service with less material. It has been mentioned yesterday also in the discussion about the global resources outlook. We need to reconsider the product system, the production and consumption system, and think about sustainability inherent in that system. So if we think circularity, don't only think recycling, there's a need also to look at extending the lifetime of materials and making sure that similar functionality is reached with less material. And that also applies for these critical materials. If you want to solve the criticality issue, we need to look for solutions where we need less of those materials, and once we have them, we use them for a longer time. So it means that we need a different system. It's not just a material flow that needs to be solved. We need a different system. And I always like this picture of the mobile phones, and these are the mobile phones of the past. The problem with many of those materials, of the critical materials, is that they are very dispersed. They're distributed around the world in very small quantities, and that makes it very difficult to bring them to recycling. If we consider recycling, it is not the recycling technology as such that is the problem. Once you have those mobile phones or the electronic circuits in the smelter, the recovery percentage is very high of the metals that you need. The problem is to get them to the smelter, because they are in drawers, they are very much everywhere, and it's very difficult to collect. So there's a whole logistic system behind that. And that's also where those business models, the alternative business models, can come in. How do we make sure that people use their devices longer and that they bring them back? By leasing the materials, that may be a solution. Leasing materials out, products out, gives an incentive for people to also bring them back, and you know where the materials go if you stay the owner of your product. So I think that's what those circular concepts also bring about. It forces the producers to think about refurbishing, remanufacturing, and how to stay the owner of the product that they put on the market. So those are aspects I think we need to bring into the debate. We need to name them more specifically, and because I hear also in the discussion that we've been having, we often still think, circularity, that's the recycling part, and it's about how we bring the metal back into the circle. So those are a few key issues there. Yeah? We need to think about criticality as an economic and strategic principle. It's not only the metals, and circularity can be part of the solution if we think about it as a broader system. And from that perspective, I think it's very important, if we look also at the policy agendas, and also the European policy agenda, which might change with the new elections, that it's very important that circular economy stays high on the political agenda, and that it's not replaced by criticality thinking or by a policy which is only based on remining and on setting up strategic alliances with mining countries. Circular economy needs to stay in the center of the policy making. It needs to stay there, so we need to keep those elements of the Green Deal and not just replace them by the criticality debate. Those two things should join forces, criticality and circularity. They need to stay together. That was my main message. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good for Carl. Carl, before you go, I've got a question for you. Now, you're talking about folks changing their business models, but you're from waste management. Should waste management also be changing their business model?
I think waste management companies have a very important role in all this. The business model of waste is very much still relying on that people are paid by the tipping fee, by the volume of waste that they can treat and process. I think waste management business should change also their business model more and more to a product sales model where they are financed by the product that they bring on the market, the recycled material or the products that they manage.
Carl Franken, ladies and gentlemen. All righty, we've laid down some groundwork. Now it's time to get to the nitty-gritty, and by that I mean the panel discussion itself. I'm going to invite the panel to join me up on stage. Please welcome to the stage the director, KU Leuven Institute for Sustainable Metals and Minerals, Tom Jones. Consultant for Circular Electronics, Suzanne van Berkem. Senior Technical Advisor, European Recycling Industries Confederation, Ricard Arbontis. And the Director of Policy and Research at the Rediscovery Center, Claire Downey. Welcome, folks, welcome. Grab a seat, picked at random, but by coincidence under your picture. I'm putting the clicker here, folks. Click it will. Click it will. We're having an impromptu conversation for which they brought slides. So, Tom, I want to begin with you, if I may. Before I do, what I want to do is give you a chance, just 2 minutes tops, a minute's better, to respond to what you just heard Carl say.
Yeah, I basically don't disagree with what has been said. It's clear that circularity is only a small part of the solution for Europe's critical raw materials conundrum. As you all know, we are extremely dependent on the critical metals that we need to meet the Paris Climate Target Agreement. Circularity will be part of the solution, but it will only be a small part of the solution in my view. In our institute at KU Leuven, circularity is a big part of our research agenda. So in the next things I want to say, I want to point it out. I just want to focus on the physical laws of thermodynamics on the circular economy agenda, because I think there's a lot of poor understanding of the physical laws that we are subjected to. I think a lot of things are being wrongly told about the possibilities of recycling and the circular economy. So I think it's vital we debunk some myths and stop speaking in simplistic terms about circular economies. So if you allow me, I've only brought 2 slides. I don't want to give a presentation here, but I just want to first show this diagram, and this is how policymakers...
Well, no, wait a sec, Tom. Just to be clear, just so we can pretend it's an interview. Let's pretend I'm asking you this question. Say the circular economy can provide only part of the necessary materials, but still needs full attention to keep the topic high in the political agenda and not be replaced by a CRM policy that largely based on remining Europe. What's your take on that, and have you brought 2 slides to demonstrate?
No, I fully agree that we need circular economy next to Critical Raw Materials Act. And of course, there is a clear link because the Critical Raw Materials Act puts recycling targets firmly on the agenda. And of course, that is only part of the circular economy strategy, but it's a major part, and we don't have to be stupid about that. So what I want to say here, I don't have much time, but what I want to say here is that the circular economy figures that you see in all the textbooks, and all of you know about these figures, is like you show a circular diagram. We saw it in the previous slides of Karel. Okay, he wants to slow it and he wants to make some modifications to it, but it's still like a perpetuum mobile. And the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, clearly states that it's impossible to have a perpetuum mobile. So basically, in every single step of the recycling process, from collection to pre-processing to metallurgical processing, you have losses. So if you have 50% collection efficiency, 70% pre-processing efficiency, and 90% metallurgical processing efficiency, your total efficiency is around 30%. So you're losing metals left, right, and center. So the idea that you can have a perpetuum mobile and that you can keep the metals in this eternal cycle is ludicrous. It's really not based on physical law. So we need to understand we have losses at any stage. So that's the first myth I wanted to debunk. The second myth is related to again, the fact that you can keep them into this eternal loop, because in reality, it's so much more complex, as you can see from this figure here, which I've taken from Simon Michaud of GTK from Finland. And I can speak for hours about this figure, but I just want to draw your attention to some key facts here. So first of all, the recycling stream that is available today for recycling to make new products is much smaller than what we need to make the new products, because we're in a growing market. We're in a market where we need to drastically boost the production volumes of lithium-ion batteries, wind turbines, electric buses, electric bikes, electric cars. So we need loads and loads and loads of metals to do that. Even in a post-capitalist world, that would be the case. The point is, you can't recycle what is not in the cycle yet. So the lithium-ion batteries end of life will become available around 2035. Before that, they are quantité négligeable, so they will not be able to meet the new needs for lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and all the other critical metals we need for the batteries. Secondly, there is also a very important dynamics in the technology that we are using. The things that we put into our systems 10 or 15 years ago are not what we need today exactly. So to give you one example, 15 years ago we had fluorescent lamps. These were lamps that were energy-saving lamps, and they replaced the incandescent lamps. They were a great invention at the time. They used rare earths, europium, terbium, and yttrium. We set up recycling processes for those, but by the time those recycling processes were efficient and were commercially available, we didn't need these metals anymore, because the fluorescent lamps were replaced by LED lamps. So suddenly, europium, terbium, and yttrium were not needed in those quantities anymore. So you see there is a change in the dynamics of technology, which makes that this cycle that you see in all these circular economy textbooks is ludicrous. It's way more complex than that. Fourth myth I want to debunk is the economics. We know we can recycle a lot of the critical metals. We have developed numerous flow sheets to do so. For example, rare earth magnets, the end-of-life magnets in electric cars or in wind turbines. We have the capability, technically, to recycle them. The problem is today that the operational costs to do so are much larger than the price you need to pay to buy virgin rare earths from China at this moment. So you see there is a mismatch there in, yes, we want to recycle, but the cost is often too high compared to the cost to buy virgin material. So as long as you don't have policy mechanisms that stop the use of primary rare earths in your new products, then it's not going to work. And this is one example, but we have a lot of similar examples in the recycling of complex products containing critical raw materials. And the final one I want to debunk is that a lot of people who are working in the field of circular economy have this simplistic belief that by definition, recycling is clean and mining is dirty. But sorry, I have to debunk that reality as well, because it's not the case in practice. If you look at the recycling of lithium-ion batteries, that is a dirty business. It is a very complex thing to recycle a lithium-ion battery with the graphite, with the electrodes, the electrolytes. You have, and Karel is well placed because he was been working on this for Belgium for many years on the PFAS problem, so the eternal chemical problem with fluorinated compounds. Lithium-ion batteries are full of fluorinated compounds. So if you do it wrongly, your recycling process of your batteries, you will either not destroy the existing PFAS in the system, or you will create new ones during your thermal treatment at 500 degrees to pre-process before your hydrometallurgical treatment. So just to say that the reality is that recycling can sometimes also be a very dirty business, and it's not necessarily cleaner than a mining process. So again, I'm not saying that we should not should not go for recycling process and not go for circular economy principles. It's a core part of our Kai Leuven work, actually. But I just want to debunk all these myths and all these simplistic beliefs often policymakers have in this very important field. Thank you very much.
Nicely done. Myths have been busted. Suzanne, let me give you 2 minutes or less to respond, and then I'll have a spontaneous question for you after that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so I completely agree with Peter Tom. The circular economy is a great principle, however, it's too simplistic. We have all these nice pictures that show an internal circle, but that's not the case. There are losses in every step of the recycling process. When you, for example, when you look at the recycling of lithium-ion batteries, there is a great loss already in only the first step, in the pre-treatment step. A lot of the cathode active materials that we all focus on in lithium-ion battery recycling is already lost over there. And indeed, battery recycling is a very dirty job. So I completely agree with that, yes. But I do think that there are many, many possibilities to approach a circular economy.
Would you say that you think the circular economy is a 100% circular economy is actually possible?
No. No, definitely not. Definitely not on the short term.
Really the harsh toke panel.
Yeah. Well, there's... should I push the green button?
The green one, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. So no, there will never be a full circular economy because there are so many hurdles. It will not definitely not be the case on the short term. So if we look for instance at the current business models for product use, it only focuses on the product use. So people buy a product, they use it and they discard it. It doesn't allow for other strategies than recycling, such as refurbishment or repair. So I don't think that the current business models are in place for a circular economy. And then also, if you look at the use of materials, it has become much more complex. If you look at plastics, for example, there are plastic blends, but there are many plastics that contain inorganic additives, but also organic additives, such as persistent organic pollutants. It's very hard to recycle both of these components. So that will definitely not be the case. And also, if you look at the high-tech apparatus, there are many multi-layers are used of metals, thin layers. That is very tough to focus on in recycling processes. So also, if you look at e-waste, for example, there are so many valuable materials, but as Mr. Franken said, they are dispersed over millions of products. So it's very tough to concentrate all these materials. But if you look at the current recycling process, products are collected, they are sorted, maybe dismantled up to a certain extent. For example, hard disk drives are removed from laptops, and then the product goes into a shredder. And then the materials are sorted by their magnetic properties or density, for example. But that means that if a metal that is present in a product and it resembles the properties of iron or aluminum or copper, it ends up with iron, aluminum, or copper. So it's lost in the probably in the pyrometallurgical treatment. So I think there are some opportunities to optimize the end-of-life technologies. If you look at the sorting schemes, we must learn more about how does a product, how is it composed? What kind of components are high on CRM materials, for example? In that way, we can concentrate the materials by components, by products, in order to concentrate the critical raw materials. But also, if you look at lithium-ion battery recycling, for example, there is much to gain because a lithium-ion battery always contains a battery management system, a casing that should be dismantled. However, that's very labor-intensive. So if we develop automated dismantling, then there are also many materials that can be saved before the battery goes into a shredder. And then finally, if all materials will end up in a recycling process. But in order to do that more sustainably, I think we should support really the innovation of improved and economically viable processes. And that can be done by minimizing the waste, by circular use of materials, but also electrify where possible. So we are still quite far from the circular economy, in my opinion, but there are some opportunities to approach the circular economy.
In one word, we won't get to 100, but what % is possible?
Well, let's start at 70%,
70%,
maybe?
that's a great floor. That's a great
Okay.
floor. Ricardo, can you respond to Suzanne in 1 or 2 minutes, and then I'll have a question for you.
Yes. So first and foremost, I would like to say thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here to discuss such an important topic. Also, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to focus a little bit on chemical legislation, and indeed that in some plastics, basically, especially in technical plastics, we have substances of very high concern and persistent organic pollutants. So basically here I would like to say maybe we have to reevaluate the way that reconsider the way that we evaluate the substances before even placing them on the market. Because at the end of the day, when these substances are, are being used by manufacturers, they are perfectly legal. But when they reach the end of life, we as recycling facilities, we are the ones that have to deal with those substances. And of course, manufacturers will come up with new substances to replace the old ones. And again, eventually these substances will again get restricted, possibly, and again, recyclers will have to deal with those. In terms of the mining industry, I also believe that we as European recyclers, we cannot provide 100% of the materials needed. So indeed, the mining industry, consider that is being done in a responsible way, will still be important for Europe's economy, but also for the global economy as well.
Fantastic. Well, here's my question. What, in your opinion, is required to further close the loop of CRMs at an EU level and deliver the Union's ambition?
So thank you very much. I only have 3 slides, if I manage to go to the slides. Okay, so today I would like to convey only 4 messages that basically they are very important for us. First and foremost is eco-design, because products that are being placed on the market, they have to be manufactured in such a way that first and foremost, we allow them to stay in the market for as long as possible, because consumers will be able to repair them by themselves or by professional repairers. And also when they reach the end of life, recyclers have to be able to dismantle and recycle these different products in an easy and fast way. This obviously, as I said, will speed up the recycling process, but also it will increase the quality of our output material. And some components that, for example, today are very difficult to extract especially from electronic products, are batteries and PCBs. When it comes to batteries, of course, most of the batteries that we see today in products are built-in batteries, so it's extremely difficult to take them out when they reach end of life. But also it's a very sensitive topic for us, because they are also, especially lithium batteries, are very prone to catching fire. So what we experience today in our recycling facilities is that we have thermal events almost on a daily basis. And these thermal events can be from sparks till explosions. And the cost after a thermal event can be from a couple of €1,000 till several millions. And if I'm not mistaken, recently we had even in France a recycling facility that was completely destroyed. So that's why, of course, there is a battery regulation on batteries and waste batteries that foresees the removability and replaceability of batteries. But of course, it has to be seen also what will happen about the derogations that we see under this regulation. The second message, and again, this is very important for us, is recycled content targets, because we need pull measures for the recycled materials, and especially critical raw materials that we produce. So basically, of course, we do not ask from going from 0 to hero overnight. So we don't say that we want 100% recycled content targets. But from discussions that we've had with some of our recycling facilities, we see that in certain cases, they recover some critical raw materials, And they of course, because the quantity was very low, they didn't find the market. I know that I'm running out of time, so 2 more things that I would like to say is basically reporting obligations. We need more information from producers for the critical raw materials they use in their products, so we can report them back to the member states, and the member states back to the Commission. And last but not least, increase the collection of products rich in critical raw materials. I think this is extremely important, especially if we want to have ambitious recycled content targets and, to close the loop as much as possible.
Ricardo, you still do have a minute or two if you'd like to
Do I?
elaborate. Yeah.
Okay, I thought I was running out of time. So
I very much appreciate that, and my instinct is to not give you back the time, but here we are.
So in this last slide, basically, I would like to focus on the number that you see. Basically, these numbers come directly from the European Commission. And the point on increased collection is extremely important because, for example, you can see 700 million mobile phones are stored in households. If I'm not mistaken, that was mentioned also before in a previous presentation. And obviously, all these mobile phones have critical raw materials. So if there are no mechanisms in place to allow consumers to return these mobile phones to recycling facilities so that we can recycle and put back into the market the critical raw materials, I think, yes, the whole CRMA and circular economy action plan cannot really work. In terms of the collection targets, if you have a look at the WEEE directive, of course, there are 2 different collection targets. And I have to say that if you have a look at the collection targets in the different member states of the EU, there are only a few that basically they reach these targets. So, and it all comes down also to how what is the calculation methodology? Because, for example, some of these member states, the calculation methodology, to not go into the nitty-gritty of this discussion, basically has also to be reconsidered. I would like to conclude that we also, as EuRIC, we support the recommendations put forward by the European Commission. Again, I would like to reiterate, collection of critical raw materials and product rich in CRMs is extremely important. And I stop here.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. Thanks a lot. I'd like to move over to Claire, but if you could just slide that clicker this way, the golden clicker. And Claire, just like everybody else, if you could take a minute or 2 and respond to what Ricardo said, and then I'll have a off-the-cuff question for you.
Perfect, thank you. First of all, thank you to the ECSP and RREUSE Network Europe for having us on the panel, and deepest apologies from my colleague, Dr. Sarah Miller, who was due to talk today in my place. So I wanted to pick up on the recommendation that was the very last recommendation on the last slide, that member states should introduce reuse and preparation for reuse targets. It's something we've been pushing for a long time, as has the RREUSE Network Europe. The European Environment Agency just recently published a paper called Accelerating the Circular Economy, and that also recommended shifting our circular policies much more towards target-based approaches. So it's good to see that coming through. And I'm really excited to share, as some of you may already know, that Ireland last month introduced our first national reuse target. It is a statutory target, and also set the groundwork for a future national repair target, which is really exciting. And we were part of the research that helped underpin that with other partners. We created a methodology for measuring reuse, but also measured the baseline. Where are we today in terms of reuse? And that found that currently in Ireland, we're reusing 6 kilos per person, and the national target that was just set is for 20 kilos per person by 2030. So we have to triple our current levels of reuse to reach that target. I think that represents really good ambition, and I think we need to see this level of ambition in our circular targets, not just realistic, but what we have to achieve.
That's fantastic. This question just occurred to me. What can cities and regions do to support business models to cater for CRMs?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I have a few...
Well, that is lucky. Fortunate.
Brilliant. So first of all, I think cities need to really look at radically reducing consumption down to the level of sufficiency. And this idea of sufficiency came up a lot yesterday in the context of the global resources outlook. How do we meet human needs and prioritize well-being while staying in the limits of our planet? Or how do we make sure there's enough for everyone, everywhere, dealt out in a just way. Cities are really well placed to understand the needs of their citizens. They're connected to their citizens. But it also needs a systems approach. So when we're thinking about where critical raw materials are used, we think about data systems and energy systems. And what are we using all this data for? As we make the digital transition, is it really necessary to digitalize everything? Certainly it's good to move away from paper, but we're creating another problem here. And for every click, every kitten video that we watch, every website that we visit, every word cloud we create, we're creating data. And data needs data storage, and it needs data transmission, and it needs interfaces. So everyone has to have a device to click a QR code. And all of that contains critical raw materials. So we need to think about how much of this is actually necessary, and how we can reduce demand and move maybe in a more mindful way through this digital transition. So cities need to think about that, look at the systems, build that into their plans, and then support the models that actually bring consumption down and not support the models that increase consumption, as was said yesterday. So some examples of that, well, first of all, education. It's not a business model, but it's critical for future innovators and also for, I suppose, communicating that sustainability message. Cities can support sharing libraries, bikes, for example, bike libraries. Bicycle frames actually contain up to 8 critical raw materials. So bike libraries, toy libraries, tool libraries, repair systems as well. Cities are doing fantastic work around supporting repair vouchers, repair cafes that also engage consumers and help them understand the value of our products. All of that keeping critical raw materials in circulation for longer. But all of this then needs citizen engagement. We need people to buy into these models, to support them, not just to create the models and the services, but actually have people use them. It's really important for the model. So we need cities to engage their citizens. And again, cities and regions are really well placed to do that because they have their networks. They're at that level, the neighborhood level. We've been doing some market research into circular economy as a term and behaviors and attitudes towards that. And we've found that while the familiarity with the term circular economy is growing, the understanding of what it actually means is still really low. We heard some people think it means money going around in circles, so I think these concepts, they're just not that clear. We've also been doing some work with the ECSP on a leadership group on citizen engagement, talking to lots of experts in this area. And one real strong message that we've had, and we've created a few podcasts around this, is that we're using language that's too complex and terms that are too complex. And certainly critical raw materials is a good example of that. So if we're trying to engage people, we need to talk about bike frames, and we need to talk about, well, not bike frames, bikes, and we need to talk about digital devices and data and so on. So that's the citizen engagement piece. And then finally, we need to also make it easier for people to do these things. And one way to do that is for cities and regions to support social enterprises. We heard yesterday again that social and environmental have to go hand in hand in the circular transition. Social enterprises do even more, I suppose, than the social impact. They've been driving circular business models for decades. They're practitioners. They make repair accessible and affordable through all the models I've already described. They're also innovators. They're trying out new models before they're mainstream, before they're commercially viable. Some great examples from the RREUSE Network Europe are ENVI, which has launched a new reuse and recycling facility for solar panels, testing solar panels, testing components for reuse before sending the remainder for recycling. With a new quality label for secondhand electrical goods with Resource in Belgium, another network of social enterprises. In Ireland, we've just launched our first e-bike library, which is very exciting, with the community-led initiative supported by social enterprise. Social enterprises also, of course, support skills building and work with marginalized communities for that social impact. These are the communities that are going to be most affected by climate change and most likely to be left behind if the transition isn't just. So they're also supporting that. I guess none of these are very, I suppose, glamorous solutions for investors. We're not going to get big processing facilities out of them, but they're whole of society approaches to what I think is a whole of society problem.
Well, thanks, Claire. It's funny, I live in Amsterdam, where we already have a pretty unique circular economy for bicycles, where you buy it and then it's stolen. And then you buy it from the thief, and then it's stolen again. It's fantastic.
Beautiful.
I didn't know we were saving CRMs. I feel really good about myself now. I've got one more question, and I'd love it if all four of you could answer. And we'll start with Claire and go down the line. The question is this: if you had a magic wand or a final wish, what would that wish be? What would you do with the wand? And I note, best is if you could answer in a minute. I know we've got a clock, but that also includes the 5-minute speech that comes after us. Claire.
Very quickly then, if we're talking about business models, we need to make the circular business models more viable, and we need to internalize the externalities, if you like, the costs of production of virgin raw materials, the cost of production of products, and rebalance that economic system. Because at the moment, it's just not viable for a lot of repair and reuse and prevention solutions to work. So we need to find a way to rebalance the economy.
Cool. Tom, what do you do with your magic wand?
I think we first need to understand the reality. I think a lot of the talk we are doing here, again, is about mobile phones. I see this coming back in several interventions, but we have to look at the volumes of critical metals that we actually need. The real volumes are going to go into wind turbines and into electric buses and electric cars, and that's where the high volumes of critical materials are really in, and where we need to think about the strategy, how we're going to produce our lithium, for example, how are we going to refine it, how are we going to recycle it. And just a wake-up call here for everyone in the audience. In Europe at this moment, we have 0 operational lithium mines, we have 0 operational lithium refineries, and we have 0 commercial-scale lithium-ion battery recycling plants at this moment. So we are at 0, 0, 0. So it's all nice to talk about bikes and recycling bikes. I'm a cyclist myself. I do that all the time. I have cargo bikes all over the place in our garage. We do everything by bike, but let's not be telling ourselves things which are not true. The CRMs contained in bikes are peripheral. They're marginal compared to the volumes of critical metals we will need to drive the energy, mobility, housing transition in our world. So let's look at the facts and realities first before we go into the details of circular economy models.
Clear and fair. Ricardo, magic wand.
So from my side, I think it comes down because legislation is a powerful tool. So basically we have a CRMA. If you ask me if it can be improved, sure, but it's a good starting point, I think. So from my side, it's really to align the CRMA with a different piece of legislation, because you have also an eco-design for sustainable products regulation, and indeed we will need in the future, especially when it comes to copper and electrification of the EU industry and the global industry, we will need large amounts of critical raw materials. But without aligning properly the different pieces of legislation, in my opinion, we will start from one step behind. So if I had a magic wand, if the policymakers can align perfectly.
No more silos in the legislation, because that's the biggest problem for the CRMA today. Exactly.
Suzanne, final wish?
If I look at it from a recycling perspective, we know all the materials are there in e-waste, in the urban mine, but for many waste streams, we don't know specifically what is in these waste streams. So I think unlimited data access, unlimited data gathering, that would be my final wish in order to improve the recycling, to know where we can find these materials.
Fantastic. I'd like to keep this conversation going. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But how about a round of applause for our panel? Thank you all very much. Suzanne, Ricardo, Tom, and Claire. Fantastic. You know, y'all can stay, or because John's going to come here and talk. I think it'd be fun if he has an on-stage audience. Y'all just stay comfortable if you want. Or you can go, but let's face it, it'll be awkward now if you do. Our final words come from the Advisor of Environment Policy and Cabinet of the Belgian Federal Minister of Environment, John Vanta. Look what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn my chair to see you.
Okay, thank you. So what I've heard here is quite a complicated message, because we need critical raw materials, but we see that the solution is not as simple as we at first sight would think. Recycling will not be enough, we've learned, so we will need an approach that is consisting of different angles. So we need mining, we have learned, and we are not good at that. Europe is lagging behind in the world context. of course, we need recycling, and there is a lot of opportunities to increase, to step up recycling by better data management, better collection systems, better recycling technologies. But we also have to move further. It's not only about recycling, it's also about reuse, it's about changing business models, it's about changing product design, make sure that products are easily reusable, that they have a long lifespan, that they do not have any toxic substances, so that they toxify the cycle afterwards. So that are very important things to work on. And finally, we also need to think about not only the product design, but also about the design of the needs in which these products have a role to play. Do we actually need all those products to fulfill our needs? And that is a very important question that is not even addressed at this moment in European policy. So when I look at the complexity of this topic, I see that there is a real need for a resource policy, and at this stage, I think in Europe, there is no real resource policy. We have bits and pieces. We have a mining strategy, or starting to have a mining strategy with the Critical Raw Materials Act. We have a recycling policy, we have an eco-design regulation, but there is no real resource policy. There is no real target. How many resources do we actually need to feed our economy? How many resources can we consume in our European economy, given the fact that we are not the only European, not the only continent in the world. There are another 7.5 billion people in this world that also want to have mobility, that also want to have housing and all that. So at this stage, we don't know in Europe how many resources we actually need, and that should be the starting point. Really start to think about what is the real demand for materials that we will require for an economy that is working for everybody in Europe, and that is also in balance with the needs of the rest of the world. We can't just claim all the resources that are available just for the European citizens. And that exercise is something which we really need to do. And that is also one of the topics during the Belgian presidency that we would like to give the message to the European Commission. Please work on a real strategy. Think about how many resources we actually need, and then you can guide policies towards that specific targets. We have a clear climate target, 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that is guiding our efforts, but we don't have a resource target, and that is actually we should need. And then secondly, demand side is really a gap in European policy. We have a recycling policy. We have now the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is the basis of a new mining strategy. But on the demand side, there is really nothing that is appearing. We're only touching the product design, but we are not really talking about how many cars do we need, how do we want to organize our mobility systems, how do we want to organize the housing, and how many materials do they require. So we also actually need to work on that, on a real demand-side policy, and that can only be realized when we, of course, know how many materials can we actually use to be sustainable. So I think this is my main thoughts when I've heard the panelists.
In that case, how about a round of applause for John? And I want to thank you all for being part of this session. Thanks, of course, to the panel. Thanks to Florian and Carl. There you are. And I believe it's time for lunch. Last one there is last in line. We'll see you after lunch.